Good afternoon, everyone. Pete Moriarty here. Great to have you here. Now, today we're going to be covering how to make sure your DNS is all in check for your G Suite. And we're going to be covering off your MX records, SPF, DMARC, DKM. If they sound like gobbledygook to you, then we're going to help you out understanding what are DNS records and why they're important. And I'm going to take you through a guide on how to get them fixed. Now, before we get into it, it's really important for me to say that if you're a business owner, it's probably not good use of your time to be messing around with your DNS records. I, for a long time, have hesitated making this video because I didn't want to encourage business owners to be messing around with this stuff. Honestly, it's not great use of your time, and it's much better to delegate to somebody else to take care of. And that's because it's really easy to get it wrong. And although there are many online guides which make it seem really easy to get this done, it's kind of like asking someone who's not really an expert to juggle knives. Yeah, if you get it right, it's going to be fine, but if you mess something up, then you're going to have a bad time. So really, at the end of the day, I would recommend you leave this to an IT professional for anything DNS. But if you want to have a go yourself, I'm going to show you exactly what to do. Like many people that I've shown how to do this, you may find that, like many people, part the way through the process, you get to the end and you decide that you want to delegate it to someone else, which I would thoroughly recommend. Okay, now we've got that out of the way, let's get into the actual content. And if you're wondering where I am, I'm actually based in a camper van at the moment, and I'm traveling around Australia. And so I'm streaming and working from wherever I am. So if you're joining from somewhere in Australia or outside of Australia, please go ahead and drop your location down below. I'd love to know where you're watching from, and we're going to jump into our guide now. So the first thing that you're going to need a few things to get this working. But the first thing that you're going to need is access to a DNS toolbox. And this is the one that I use and recommend. It's called MX Toolbox. And MX Toolbox is the one that we want to use in this session for me to show you exactly how all of this works. You're also going to need access to your DNS. So I happen to use Cloudflare for my DNS. You might be using GoDaddy or Crazy Domains, but we're going to be using Cloudflare, and I'm going to show you how all this works in Cloudflare. Number three thing that you need is the Google Admin Console. And so the Google Admin Console is where we do all of the admin settings for our G Suite account. So obviously you need to be an administrator. You're going to need to be able to access that. And then I'm going to use some of the Google help guides here as well. And so here with the help guides, you can see these actually cover off some of the protocols that we're going to be working with. So we've got DMARC there, SPF, and then we have the MX records as well. Cool. Okay. So now we've got all those taken care of. I want to actually take you through what the DNS records are and how to understand what is what. There's A records, there's SPF, MX records, CNAME records. It all gets a bit confusing, but the ones that are most important here are the MX records. And the MX records are the ones that tell your domain name where to deliver email and tell the email servers all over the world where to deliver email for you as well. And so these are MX records. They stand for Mail Exchanger, and we are going to be working with our MX records today. Now, there are four types of records that we're going to be working with: MX, SPF, DKIM, and DMARC. And those four records represent different kind of elements on mail delivery. They're all related to the MX records, and they all have to do with mail delivery, making sure that email comes into your domain properly, and then making sure that email goes out of your domain name properly. Now, I'll try and describe these in different ways to give you a bit of an idea of what each of them are. MX records are like a address book, or like your entry in the address book. And what they do is they tell someone where to go. So if you remember an old school address book, you'd open it up, you look for someone's name, and in there it would tell you exactly where you need to go to get to that person's house or what their phone number is, and that's what those ones do. And so MX records basically point someone to the right mail server. Now, one mail server might be G Suite, one mail server might be Microsoft Office 365, it might be a server sitting in an office somewhere, but MX records are going to basically point someone's email to the right place somewhere on the internet. The next ones are called SPF, and that stands for Sender Policy Framework, and that is basically like allowing someone to send on your behalf, or let's say a license to send. And that license to send says which email hosts are allowed to send email using your domain name. Now, anyone with a computer can pretend to be someone's email address, right? It'd kind of be like, getting an envelope and putting someone else's name on the back of the envelope. But if you have a license to send, then it actually gives you a bit more of a confirmed sending on the actual letter. If you know, when you receive a letter, it'll has little stamps there and little barcodes and things that have been stamped on by the post office. They're the kind of things that are picked up from from the different post offices and different mail routes, and they actually identify who is sending mail and where is it coming from. And so that SPF record is a license to send. If there is not a license to send, if someone sends an email from an email server and it's not been licensed, then it will deprioritize that email. And so servers all over the world will look for those licenses. And if someone sends an email from a Microsoft server and your emails are based on G Suite, if everything is configured correctly, then it should actually deprioritize the sending from that Microsoft server. So that's what the license to send is for, and that is SPF. Okay, let's talk about the next one. The next one is DKIM, and I've forgotten the acronym for that. But DKIM is a way of authenticating your mail when you send it. So when you send your email, most email is, well, all email is actually unencrypted. But what DKIM does is it electronically and digitally signs the email. It doesn't encrypt it, but it signs it with an electronic signature. And what it says is, I'm really coming from this particular source. And think of that a little bit like a wax seal. When you put a wax seal on a letter, then you know that no one else has opened it and it's actually come from this person. And so when we implement DKIM and we set that up in our DNS records, it means that emails that are sent from G Suite are actually going to be properly authenticated as really coming from G Suite. So that's what DKIM does, and that's what we're going to use that for. And the final one is called DMARC. And DMARC is basically, it's a policy, and what the DMARC policy does is it actually enforces the SPF policy. And so think of DMARC as like the police to enforce the license to send. So if someone's been granted a license to send on your behalf on your domain, then DMARC polices that, and you can either have a relaxed police force who kind of don't mind if other people send on behalf of your domain, or you can have a really strict military police, and you get to choose that when you implement the DMARC policy. And we're going to take you guys through and show you the differences between those. Cool. So now we've gone through the different types of DNS records there. What we're going to do from here on out is we're going to go through actually setting them up. As I said, you're going to need some different areas in your account. So we've got the MX Toolbox, that's at mxtoolbox.com, and we're going to be using that one to set up our mail flow and test all of our records. Cloudflare is your DNS access. You need your admin panel, and then we're going to use some of the others here. So the first one we want to get done is our MX records. We're going to check that the actual MX records are correct, and to do that you just basically type in your domain name. I'm going to use itgenius.com, and I'm going to do an MX lookup on my MX toolbox here. And what this is going to do is this is going to allow me to see what my records are, and it's actually going to give me a few little tick boxes here. Now you notice here that there's a number of different records. There's some numbers here, there's some host names, there's even IP addresses. The only ones that matter for us are the numbers and the host names, because the IP addresses are typically automatic, so we don't need to worry too much about those. And you can see here that it's even picked up that my email service provider is Google Apps. Okay, so that is all looking correct. So how do we actually do that? Let's jump into our DNS and have a look at what that looks like. So let's go into my Cloudflare here. I'm going to open up my itgenius.com, and I'm going to go to DNS, and this is where I can set up my different DNS records. Now there's A records, CNAME records, text records. I don't have time to go through what all the different ones mean, but we're going to be working with our MX records here. You can see that there are actually 5 MX records that have been created. So we've got a primary mail server, and that is priority 1. And then we have alternative mail servers with 2 on priority 5 and 2 on priority 10. And the priority is as simple as it sounds. You're basically saying which ones you want to prioritize sending mail to. Now, Google's one of the best infrastructure companies in the world, although they're not perfect, and IT systems are not perfect. Every now and again, through either user error or computer error, you have issues that happen where a mail system will stop working, an email delivery system will stop working. And so rather than have your emails bouncing back to the senders, we want to have backup servers that they go to. And those backup servers are going to be in different geographical locations and going to have different configurations so that they're always available. And so that's why we have priorities and we have different levels of mail servers. So we'll always have one primary one, but then we'll have multiple backups as well. So that's the reason that we have the different ones that are here. So let's go ahead and jump back in and have a look at what are the MX records that we actually need to set up for your G Suite. You can see here that in the help guide, we've got the different levels of MX records that need to be created or configured. And you can see there it's just asking us in the host name to just put an @ sign. That means that we're not going to do it for a subdomain. We're just going to do it for our primary domain. And then you can see here that we've got our different priorities. And so it's just a matter of cutting and pasting these, pretty straightforward. And then if we are in our Cloudflare, we're going to create a new record. Remember, we're doing a MX record because we're working with mail. If you want it to just be for the root domain, you just put the @ sign. And then we're going to pop in the mail server there. Now you'll see it's going to ask us for the priority, and we said this one was our number 1 priority, so we're going to go ahead and pop in number 1. And then it's just a matter of pretty much cutting and pasting to make sure that all of these are connected along, and they will all appear in your MX records, and they'll automatically order themselves. Now, obviously, I've set this up myself previously, and it is all working. Now, importantly, if you are setting up these mail records, you need to then remove any previous mail records for any previous mail service. You might have an old email service, you might have Office 365, and so any of those previous mail services that you may have used, you actually want to clear those out and remove them. Keep in mind, the moment that you implement this, it's going to start updating DNS servers all over the world. And so if you do happen to get something wrong, your emails might start bouncing with your customers. So if for any reason you are not confident with this, it might be better to delegate someone else to take care of it. Okay, so we've got the MX records done. Now it's time to do the most important bits, because this kind of tells us where the mail should go. Remember, I said it's a little bit like having an address book. But what we want to do is, after setting up the address book, we also want to make sure that we have a little bit more security added to our mail, so that not just anyone can pretend to be us on the internet. And most business owners are not aware that SPF, DKIM, and even DMARC actually exist. And so that's why we're going to be going through those now. Okay, so let's go into our next one, which is SPF. And I'm going to go back here to my super tool. I've got the domain name there, and we're going to do an SPF lookup. And you can see here, this is going to show us all of the SPF records that I've created. And so from here, this is like an allow list. Remember, this is a license to sell. And so this is the list that we are allowing for anyone to send on behalf of our domain. Now, Google is not the only place that we're actually sending from if we're sending from a G Suite account. It may be an Infusionsoft account that we have. We may have an ActiveCampaign account. Any one of those different places on the internet we may be sending email from. And so we want to make sure that anything that is sending email on behalf, including our website, actually includes the SPF record in our record here inside our DNS. If you don't get this right, if we don't authorize Google to have a license to send, then anytime we send email from Google, it's actually less likely to be delivered to our customers. If we don't have a license to send for our ActiveCampaign or our Infusionsoft, then those emails are not going to go out either. If we don't have a license to send from our website, well, when someone fills out a web form, we might not get the email notification coming in to our inbox. So this is what it looks like when we have them here set up in an SPF record. You can see here that I've got the Google SPF record that's there. We have Infusion Mail, which is Infusionsoft. I've got Zendesk there. I've got a number of other manual IP addresses, and they are linked to websites and other places on the web. And then you can see we also have Mandrill, which is another email sending service that we use. And importantly, the last one here is, what do we do with everything else? And so it's called the tilde prefix here. That one will actually set up the SPF record to say, if someone is not on the list, if they don't have a license to send, mark the mail as dubious. Now, there's other options here. If you just put a minus sign, it will actually drop the mail. It will say this email is not a legitimate email, and it'll automatically drop it. But I leave the tilde in there just in case. And so that will allow you to say that anything that does not have a license to send is just going to be questioned, but not necessarily automatically dropped. I could be a bit stricter on that now that we've got it all set up correctly, and probably put in the minus sign and just drop anything else. But that's how it's set up right now, and that's probably the easiest thing for you to do, particularly if you're going to be setting this up to set up your website and other apps. Inevitably, most people will forget one or two applications when they're running around trying to find the records for all of these. Now, how do you find those records? Well, you're going to need to go to the help guides for each one of those different websites or services that you're using, and you need to find the SPF record settings for each one of those, and then come back and add them into here. So how do we actually create an SPF record? Well, let's go into our DNS, and an SPF record is going to sit in a text record. And so text records are a way of creating a record inside your DNS. It's a bit different to an MX record. It's a way of just putting other technical data into your DNS, which doesn't normally fit in the A records or the MX records or the CNAME records. And so what we're going to do is we will go into our text records here. Let me show you what that looks like. And inside our text record, you can see that, okay, itgenius.com SPF. Here we go. Excellent. So we've got our SPF record. Google actually has a example one that you can get started with. So if you go to the SPF record help page, you can see that Google will actually have a example one. Let me see if I can find their example. So that's your starter one. SPF, you just need to have there regardless. Include Google means you're adding Google to the list of included services. And then the all at the end there with the tilde is going to specify what you do with anything that is not on your list of licensed to send mail service. Okay, so we've got those done. Great. Then we're going to come back in and we're also going to add all the others. So you can see I've got my SPF. It just tells the text record that this is an SPF record that we're creating. Next up, we have the actual Google SPF record. I have the other SPF records. Any manual IP addresses I want to add, I just put in as IP4, and then I put in the address there, and then all the way through to the tilde, and then we go ahead there and click save, and that's going to automatically add that to our domain name DNS. Super easy, right? Now that takes time to get perfect. You've got to make sure that you've got them exactly right, because if they're not exactly right, then it's not going to give the correct license to send to your email domains. And so I like to test these by actually sending an email and then jumping into my mailbox. So I send an email to myself, and then I open up the mail headers and I review whether or not it has passed SPF. I don't have time to go into that in this video, but you can research how to check mail headers. They actually go through into your email, and inside of Gmail, you can view the mail source and it will show you all the headers. Then you can view those and make sure that that has been done. Okay, we've done 2 out of 4. We've done our MX records, and now we've gone through and we've done our SPF records as well. They are 2 pieces to the puzzle, but remember, we want to go on to the next one. And from here, we want to go to our wax seal. And so the wax seal is our DKIM, and that's how we're going to electronically sign these so they're actually signed properly. And when they're signed properly, it's going to be a little cryptographic message on the email that actually says, yes, this has actually come from Google, or yes, this has actually come from Microsoft, but obviously we're using Google as an example here. Okay, so let's go into our admin panel, and inside our admin panel is where we're going to manage our DKIM. The easiest way to do that is just search for DKIM, and it's in the Authenticate Email menu setting inside of G Suite. So that's going to open this up for us in our admin panel. Obviously, you need to be a G Suite administrator to get access to this, and this is where we're going to make it happen. Okay, so Authenticate Email, let's open that up, and from here, you can see that this is going to give us a host name and then also a text record value, and it's just a matter of grabbing that, and from there, we're going to cut and paste that into another text record. Now, remember, the purpose of this is a wax seal, and so this wax seal is going to authenticate the emails. We first need to set this up in our DNS, and then we need to wait 24 to 48 hours before we switch it on. And then once we switch it on, it's going to activate the wax seal, and any email that gets sent from G Suite is automatically going to include that wax seal. Now, we don't want to activate that wax seal until it's actually been set up in the DNS and it's propagated, because DNS can take up to 24 to 48 hours to kind of swim its way around the internet for everyone to get the message that this has been updated. And so this is one that you want to set up and then come back to in 2 days' time. Okay, so we've got our code there, and we're simply going to take that code. We're going to go back to our DNS. You can see here that in this instance, we are not actually using itgenius.com. It's not actually the root domain name. So when we go and create that record, let's cancel that old record I used as an example. And when we go and create this record here, let's go and open that up. We're going to do a text record, and then we're going to grab the actual Google domain key. We're going to pop that in the top, and then our content we're going to drop in the bottom. And so it's not going to be on the actual root level. It's going to sit on the subdomain level, and that's just the way that DKIM works. We're going to hit the save button, and that's going to automatically save the record for us. Here's one that I prepared earlier. The DKIM automatically sits there, so it's always ready to rock and roll. Okay, that's about it. The only thing we need to do then in 24 hours time is we need to come back to our Authenticate email screen, and we're going to click the button here that says Start Authentication. Mine is currently authenticating, so I've only got the stop button there, but we're going to start authentication, and that's going to enable our authentication there. There we go, we're done. 3 out of 4, awesome. Okay, so let's go on to DMARC. So we're up to number 4 now, and we are going to do DMARC. And remember, DMARC are the police that are going to enforce the SPF record. And so what DMARC does is it gives us another level of enforcement in actually having a transparency report. And I'm going to try and stick with me here, guys. We get a transparency report when we use DMARC from all of the mail servers in the world to report in on their emails that they sent to our domain. And it's actually going to say to us whether they successfully delivered email to our domain or whether they dropped email to our domain. And what that means is that if someone is spamming or pretending to be us, which is a very, very common occurrence, it's a very common type of phishing attack. You'll get an email that looks like it came from your CFO, and when you respond to that email, you know, they say, hey, send me $10,000 to this offshore bank account, please. And then what happens is you reply to that email, and it may even be being bounced through another external server. And unfortunately, many people have been scammed due to scams like that. And so what we're going to be doing is we're going to be switching on DMARC, which remember is the police that enforce the SPF records. So they're going to enforce the license to send, and this is going to actually gain a transparency report from everyone else in the world who is sending mail through the world's mail servers. Now, do you actually need to read every one of those reports? No, that's not important. What is important is that you're forcing those accounts to be transparent, and you're actually forcing the implementation of the license to send. So to turn on DMARC, it's a little bit more complicated on this one, but we're going to take you through it. You can see here that there are a number of different DMARC policies, and it does get pretty advanced. Again, we're going to be using a text record, and you can see here that there are a number of different operators which will tell you what to do with email. But the most basic concept for you to grasp is we're going to be instructing mail servers how to implement and how to enforce the license to send. We're going to say, right, well, if you uncover an email that is not included in the license to send, then from there you can either quarantine it, reject it, or do nothing. Okay, so we've got multiple options here. You can quarantine, you can reject, or you can do nothing. So quarantine means telling or instructing someone's spam filter to quarantine that email every single time. Rejecting means obviously rejecting that email completely. And then if you do nothing, the none option is we're just going to report on the mail flow, but we're not actually going to do anything with it. And so you can see here we've got the different operators. So P would be policy. So policy would be none, quarantine, or reject. And then we're going to give a percentage as well. Because when you implement DMARC, one of the things that you can do is you can actually choose to do a phased approach. If you've got a lot of mail flow, we send thousands of emails a day, invoices, automatic responses from our billing system and all those kind of systems to different customers. If we're sending that many emails and we want to implement a policy like this, if we get it wrong and we accidentally enforce too strongly, well then legitimate emails may not be sent from some of our internal systems, or maybe some of our customers won't receive emails they are supposed to receive. And so if we want to, we can actually implement this slowly. And what we usually do is we'll start with none. We'll start with just reporting. Then step number 2, we'll go to quarantine. And then when we're really comfortable with that, we'll go to reject. And based on what you can see here, we can choose to act on certain levels of email as well, whether it's like 10% or 20% as we're phasing this in. But I'd say start with the none, start with the 0 reporting, and then bit by bit implement the others. And so let's go ahead and have a look at what our actual DMARC record looks like. So I'm going to go into my super tool here to the start where we started, and let's go and look up our DMARC policy for itgenius.com. By the way, this is public information. This is all based on somebody's actual public DNS records, and when something is on public DNS records, then you can search any domain name and basically get access to this. Okay, so you can see here our record record is currently set up as DMARC. The policy is to quarantine. So the policy is to quarantine. We are going to reject. It is 20%, and then RUA, return address. What that means is that anyone who is running a mail server anywhere in the world, and this is the Microsofts, the Googles, or anyone else, they will actually send an email report, sometimes daily, sometimes weekly, on any emails that they send to that email domain. Anyone that they've sent on behalf of your domain, they're actually going to send you that transparency report, and this is how that enforcement actually works. And so we are going to quarantine the email. The policy, though, is to reject. It's 20% of emails, so it's not all of emails, and then they're actually going to send the transparency report through to my direct email address is where it's going to. Okay, so what does that look like in our actual DNS? Let's jump into our actual DNS. I will open up my DMARC policy. So we've got that there, and again, there is an example to generate and create your own record here in the Google Help Guide. And I'll post all the links to the Google Help Guides below this video. Okay, they are our 4. Let's do a quick summary on the 4 different types of DNS records and what they are actually used for. Remember, the MX records are your address book, and what that chooses is where the email actually goes to. It's like your public address book listing. Number 2 is SPF, that is a license to send, and what that does is that confirms that any mail service sending on your behalf is actually authorized to do so, and so you can choose who does and who doesn't have a license to send on your behalf. DKIM is the wax seal that says, yes, this is truly actually an authenticated email that has come from the correct sender that it says that it's come from. And then number 4 is DMARC. That is the police that enforce the license to send, and they include the transparency reports as well. As I said at the start of this video, this is really stuff that is not a great idea for you to be messing about with if you're a business owner and you are not a complete techo. DNS took me literally years to master, and most people will jump on Google and find one blog post that tells you how to do MX, but as you can see, that's only actually one step of the process. And so if you're interested in having this done professionally, so you know there is guaranteed no issues and it's going to be done correctly the first time, and there's absolutely no risk of you losing any email or having legitimate emails going to people's spam. Once you trash your sender reputation with an email, it unfortunately doesn't come back, so you've got to be really careful with that. If that's of interest to you, then please get in touch with our team by the links below, and we'll be certainly very happy to help you out making sure that it's properly implemented for your business. Now, if you are a G Suite user and you've not yet joined our G Suite community, then there will be a link below this video where you can get access to free guides, support, and videos like this before they're released to the public. And if you are interested in engaging with other business owners all over the world who are using G Suite, then that group here is a great place to get started. And of course, if you're not yet a customer of itGenius, you can get access to some pretty cool perks just by transferring your G Suite billing into us. So if that's something that you're interested in, there is details below there as well. If you're not yet a customer, I'd love to welcome you into the family. Working with us has great benefits, and we support small businesses all over the world. I will see you in the next video, guys. Thanks so much for tuning in. If this was useful, I would love to know if we can improve, then please let us know as well. And until next time, I'll see you guys soon. Take care.